If you're missing this, then you're missing one key thing that can help your books connect to readers who are absolutely going to love them. And that is theme and message. And the thing is, these two concepts are so often discarded by writers as something that their English teachers used to harp on in middle school or high school. Okay, so I was one of those middle and high school English teachers. But here's the thing. The reason why theme and message are so important is that they're actually tapping into some deep, powerful underlying reasons as to why readers love a book and dislike or loathe another book. So why would you just want to leave that to chance when you can actively engage with the theme and message of your current book and make them awesome and attractive to the right readers who you want to actually enjoy your story? Sound good? So let's dive into why theme and message matter for your story. And make sure you hang around to the end of this episode because I'll be sharing my best tips and tricks for how to find the theme and message in your story if it's hiding in there, and how to best communicate your theme and message to readers. Because, of course, you're not going to walk around saying, the message of my book is... And then 3 of my tips on how to best communicate your theme and message to readers in a way that they're actually going to care about. And of course, that means that you connect with the right readers for your book. This is Janeen Ippolito, Author Culture. Let's talk. Now, as I mentioned previously, not only was I one of those high school English teachers who, yes, made you discuss the theme and message of all of those books you had to read in middle or high school, but I also do have over 15 years of experience in the publishing industry, both as an editor and marketing strategist, but also as an author who really likes people to find my books, preferably the right readers at the right time who are going to actually enjoy those stories. Because shockingly, then those readers, leave reviews and leave endorsements and recommend your book to others and all those other fun things, and everybody wins. And for those of you who are pitching to publishing houses often also have their own internal standards for the themes and messages of the books they're going to accept. This is especially true for smaller publishing houses that often develop their own business brands around the themes of the books they grab for their single imprint or their various imprints. And also, themes can be so vital to different genres, and messages can be such a key selling point to various genres that even at bigger publishing houses, they're still looking at this stuff. And so if you can figure out the theme and message of your book and be on point with it, it's going to help you so much when you're talking about marketing and sales and pitching your book to prospective agents or publishing houses if that's your game. And since my whole perspective on storytelling is as communication and marketing is communication and all these things you're talking to people, people are meaning makers. And when we're talking about meaning makers in the educational field, which I was in for a number of years, this is all about how people are going to interact with a story, bringing in their own background, their own knowledge, their own ideas of what they do know and what they think they know, their whole experience of their entire lives and their experiences of that particular day, as well as their opinions, thoughts, beliefs, biases, etc. They're bringing all of that to the text when they're reading it, whether or not they're entirely aware of it. Essentially, they're bringing their whole worldview to the text every time they're engaging with some kind of reading material. And the thing is, people have to do that because you're not literally there to explain the story to them. You can't lean over their shoulder as they're getting to your inciting incident going, hey, isn't that cool? I have an inciting incident there. And it means this, and it means this, and it means this. They don't have you there to do that. So they need to be able to engage with the story, check into all that foreshadowing, all those breadcrumbs you've dropped, hopefully get super involved in creating this story in their own head using their imagination and following through to the end of the book. And the thing is, while you can't be there to individually explain everything to them, nor would you really want to be, because, hey, they're reading a book, and as a reader, you really wouldn't want someone kind of staring over your shoulder. What you can do is use the elements of story as a way to make sure that your meaning and your message has the best chance of getting through. And you may also be in a place where you're like, well, Janeen, I'm okay if they have their own takeaways from my book and their own ideas from my book, and that's cool. But that doesn't deny the fact that the kind of themes you're using and the messaging that you're putting in your book, whether intentionally or not, is going to have an impact on readers. So, hey, since it's there, let's use it mindfully and amazingly so that we can create fantastic books. Now, let's bring out our Merriam-Webster and get some clear definition on what theme means. Theme, a subject or topic of discourse or of artistic representation, aka guilt and punishment, is the theme of the story. Okay, so that's kind of helpful. And what the major takeaway of this can really be is that themes of stories are often 1 to 3 words long. They're more of these big picture concepts, these vibes, these moods, these emotions, these very high concept ideas. So when you're thinking about a theme, you're thinking about hope or true love or forgiveness or those kind of things. But because Merriam-Webster wasn't incredibly helpful there, we're going to hop over to study.com and see what they can do to give us some more insight into this word. The theme of a story is the underlying message or concept that the author is trying to convey to the reader. The theme of a story is generally an opinion the writer wants to convey through their storytelling. Okay, this one is definitely more helpful, although if you read through that, you know that it's using the word message and theme sort of interchangeably, and that happens a lot when you start Googling theme and message. People kind of mix them up and they kind of have their own definitions for them. That's just how it goes. These are two rather abstract concepts. They're powerful, they're potent, and they have an impact, but they're also a little bit wibbly wobbly in terms of nailing them down. An important thing to remember when you're thinking about the concept of theme is that it's often repeated over and over in different variations. And so the story is always going to be coming back to it. So in musical terms, when you think about like the Star Wars theme, if you watch the movie Star Wars, that music or whatever theme is connected to a certain character will be played repeatedly during the movie at different times. So when a certain character comes on, you might hear their theme. Or when there's a dramatic moment, you might hear a very bombastic version of a theme, but then during quieter moments, you might hear a quieter bit and piece of that theme. And I'm not going to go too much into that because then it talks about musical use of themes. That's a little bit out of my depth, but there is some correlation in terms of the idea that it's going to be repeated in very small and big ways. And when you're working on a story, if you're tossing in lots of different themes and messages all the time, it's going to confuse the reader a little bit. And naturally, if you're following some kind of a trope or some kind of established storytelling mode or narrative formula, you're going to see that the same concept is sort of repeated in different ways throughout the story, and that the story comes back to that particular growth theme over and over again. And we're going to discuss that a little more when we talk about how to find your theme and what they're wrapped around in. But that word growth does in fact mean your theme is often tied to the character arc and how the protagonist is growing in your story. Now, when we're talking about message is basically the specific way that your theme is conveyed in your story. That's essentially what it is. When I do marketable manuscript critiques for my clients and I share the theme and the message that I'm pulling out of the manuscript that I see that they're emphasizing, the theme is going to be 1 to 3 words and the message is going to be more specific, like this character must learn to forgive so-and-so relative from this tragic incident in the past in order to move forward, or something like that. So you're taking the idea of forgiveness and you're making it very, very granular. Or as K.M. Weiland says in a really nice blog post that she did back in 2014, you're making it very exclusive to this story. You're taking this big concept and you're nailing it down to what it looks like in the story you're writing. And figuring out the message doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a moment in the story where some character talks to another character and speaks the message. If you're thinking about messages in terms of that, then of course you're going to think of messages as preachy or didactic or very moralistic. You don't necessarily have to have the message be literally spoken in your story, but you need to understand what you're trying to convey because it will actually help your story and your character arc to be extra tight and effective as well. And this comes down to one of my absolutes. I don't have many of these when it comes to fiction, so go ahead, listen up here. All stories have a theme. All stories have a message. Let me repeat. All stories have a theme. And all stories have a message. Because stories are communication. Your story as a whole is essentially some kind of communication to another person. It literally is a message. It is words. I know that might seem a little bit reductionist, but that really is what it comes down to. And so how you're crafting it and everything really is a way that you are talking to someone else. Now, I do hear people who say, well, Janeen, why can't my story just be a story? Why does it have to have a message? And again, I think when they have that idea of messages as boring or drudgery and moralistic, they're really mistaking the idea of their story as communication with a very specific form of communication that is very sort of preachy, didactic, very intentionally, overtly message driven, trying to hammer home a certain point or platitude or allegory. Your story having a message or theme does not mean your book is an allegory. Those things are two different areas. But no matter what you try to say or do, if you are in fact giving your story to someone else to read, they are going to be engaging with that story. They are going to be trying to figure out the meaning of that story. They're going to be trying to make sense of that story. They're literally reading those little marks on a page, trying to make sense of them. And so they're going to try to pull out some kind of message, even if they're not doing it overtly or consciously, because they are trying to take those little marks on a page and transform them into something in their head. Whether it's visual images or whether it's concepts or whatever, they're having to do that engagement. So you are communicating something to them, whether or not you like it. Now, when people say, I just want my story to be a story, what they really often mean, I believe, is that they want to be able to play and explore and tease around ideas that may or may not reflect their own values. And so when they say, well, I don't want you to take this story seriously, I don't want you to read a lot into it, what might be connected with that is please don't read into it that I'm putting my own values in here or that I'm trying to make some big statement. I'm trying to play and explore and process. I am not necessarily trying to communicate something profound to you. I am just playing or teasing ideas out. Can I please be separated from the story so that the story can just kind of live as something apart from me? And that is legit. Exploration can be a very legit form of writing. And if you're just writing your story for yourself or for close friends, or with this idea that it's just going to be this testing ground or this playground for you, that is totally fine. And if you want your book to just stay in that place, go for it. But as soon as you start thinking, I know I said I only wanted this to be my own playground, just for my friends and for us to hang around and play around with ideas, but I kind of want to make money on this. I kind of want to sell this to people who don't know me. I kind of want to maybe advertise this or have it be something that people can understand without me having to explain it to them. Well, then, my friend, you need to start thinking about your message and theme and how they are getting communicated to readers in the pages of your book. And as a side note, this is the reason why beta readers are so valuable in the editing process, because one of the things that a beta reader can help you do is not just find typos or say, hey, this character was holding a bunch of flowers in this scene, and then in this scene they said they were holding a bunch of steak knives and those aren't the same thing. You have a continuity error. With beta readers, you can actually use them as a test group or focus group to see if the theme and message you were trying to get across, the vibes and tropes and takeaways that you were trying to get across actually work. They help you figure out if what you were trying to clarify with your setting and characters and character arc and plot and everything is actually working the way you want it to. This is a reason why it's really, really helpful to get beta readers who've actually read in your genre before. Because genre, as I've said in previous videos, can function like its own kind of language or its own kind of slang or code. And so you want people to read this book who have some familiarity with that particular code and they kind of get it. People who haven't read in that genre maybe won't get it or maybe will find things problematic that aren't really a problem for that genre, that make sense for that genre, but outside of it don't really suit the taste of other readers. Now here's the thing. You don't need to figure out the theme or message of your book when you start writing it. It is not required. Pantsers, you can run free and wild and throw all the crazy sand in the sandbox and try to create a sandcastle later, and that is totally okay. Because theme and message can be so amorphous and so high concept, sometimes you might find that it's easier to just discover it on the way, and that is okay. You might be the kind of author who doesn't love having things stamped out all ahead of time. You want to be able to explore on your own. Totally fine. But you definitely do want to start figuring out your theme and your message when it comes to editing your book, especially if you want to market your book effectively to the right readers who will understand what you're trying to get and will resonate with it. Or, as the case may be shocked and outraged, because sometimes you can actually target readers to challenge them rather than to affirm them. But we're going to discuss that more later on in this episode, so make sure you hang around for that. Now, the thing is, some people actually go to the opposite of extreme, and instead of using their first draft to discover their theme or message, they'll actually figure it out ahead of time. This is especially true if you're writing very aggressively to market, where you're going to be using very formulaic plots, or might be choosing your theme or message from a list, informed by a list of tropes, informed by reader expectations, and going in there saying, I am going to hit this theme. This can help you to finish a book more quickly. It can help you to have less work doing your edits. It can help you hit a certain spot in the market, and it can just make marketing easier on the whole. I'm sort of a plotter pantser, where I often do discovery right to a certain bit, partly because no matter how much I plan, I still have to figure things out during my first draft. But once I do figure out the theme and message in my first draft, I will actually go back and I will weave it through at the beginning to make it easier on myself, so that when I'm going through edits, I don't have to worry about how the theme or message is showing up as much. And that's just because I kind of love to throw the kitchen sink in a lot of my books. And so if I don't have that kind of specific guidance, and if I'm not nailing things down in my first draft, then I might throw in 3, 4, or 5 themes into my book, because I'll kind of forget that I had themes in there already. And then I'll get to my edits and go, why did I do this to myself? So that is a taste of my process, and why, even though I will discovery write a bit, I will also go back to the beginning during my first draft once I've really nailed down my theme and message, and I will tweak everything and then finish out the book. And in terms of specific ways of how these pre-made or previously established themes and messages are used, think about Christmas movies. They often have themes of, let's say it together, love, forgiveness, Christmas magic, which is usually the very fluffy kind, coming together, community, small town charm, and wholesomeness. And the message is often something like, the meaning of Christmas is love, doing good to others is good, fluffy, innocent Christmas magic is real, and you should believe in something slightly beyond the ordinary, especially if it sparkles and looks like a winsome old person. I mean, you get it. But in the case of those Christmas movies, they are absolutely figuring out their theme and message right from the get-go, usually from a list of tropes and predetermined themes and messages, because that's what people are expecting. And they are interested in affirming those expectations of those particular viewers, because it is an easier way to hit the market, to get the views, which increases profit shares and all of those fun things. Now, whether or not you figured out your theme ahead of time, you definitely need to figure out your theme during edits. And if you're still kind of struggling through that, here are some ways to figure out your message and your theme. If you find yourself stuck in your editing phase trying to discern a message or a theme, or you have a couple of options, one of the things you can do is actually become familiar with the typical messages or themes of books in your genre. If that naturally aligns with your own goals for the book, then go for it. Don't make life harder than it has to be by trying to do something super original, if something that is already a standard theme or message also works with where you want to take the book. Don't make it harder on yourself when a pattern will work. Now, sometimes patterns don't work as easily, so another way that you can find your theme or message is look at the normative characters and the kind of things that they affirm as good versus evil or bad or wrong, or even just unhelpful. Normative characters are those characters who serve in some way to guide, lead, or help the protagonist on their journey. They often show up as mentor characters, best friend characters, although best friends can also serve as foils. So it depends on the kind of best friend you're talking about. But even then, sometimes even in the best friend choosing something unhelpful, that can show what the story thinks of as helpful and normative and good. These normative characters can also be an openly religious or moral character. They might be a parent, they might be someone in authority. Conversely, sometimes you have the adorable kid just showing up and being a mentor figure, or in science fiction or fantasy, sometimes it's a talking animal, or the alien, or the artificial intelligence. This can also be a thing, a system of belief, or a religious belief of some kind, or even just a code of honor of some kind. But whatever this thing is, this normative character or system or thing is something that your character trusts to give them ideas of what is right or wrong and to guide them in those ideas and concepts. And so when you're looking at that normative character, when you're looking at that normative system, that can be a good way to figure out what your theme or message is, because you're going to see how your protagonist is interacting with that character, with that system of belief or that code of ethics or whatever it is. And that is going to help you figure out what they are learning or growing in, which ties us into a third way of finding your theme and message, which is looking at the protagonist's arc. What is the main character learning, and or how are they growing? Ideally, your character is growing towards something good. That is, in a sense, a moral choice, which means aka some kind of theme or message. And again, what it specifically looks like, what they're specifically learning, what they have to specifically overcome, which is going to end up in your message, that is based on your book. But that arc really ties into your theme and message. So look for that and look for the ways you can refine that to tie into your message in the story. Because when we're talking about revealing a certain kind of message without being preachy, you're going to look for the arc. So if it's a growth arc, what is your character growing towards? What is something good that they need to embrace and something bad or negative that they need to let go of? If your character has a flat arc, what is some good, strongly held belief that they need to cling to when everything is battering against them and when they're having this moment of truth during the midpoint? What is that going to look like? Conversely, if the character has a tragic arc, you're going to say, okay, where did they start out that was a good place? And what is tempting them to end up on a negative path? What does that look like? And what are you saying in the story about what is negative and what is positive, or what is good or what is bad, what is healthy, what is unhealthy? What should they have done and what did they do instead? Now, of course, there are even more ways to figure out how to uncover your theme and message in your story. This is by no means exhaustive. I do a lot more work when I'm doing my one-on-one with clients and in my courses, but hopefully this will get you started. And if you're looking for more ideas for this, you can always Google Foo. Now, let's talk about how to communicate your theme and message to readers in a way they're going to enjoy. You don't really want to create a social media post talking all about your insightful, tragic character arcs in your story. Like, you're not going to phrase it that way, even if you're talking about it that way. You might say, my character, I have a train wreck character, or that kind of thing, but you're not going to break it down in technical writing terms. So here are 3 ideas for how you can use that awesome knowledge of your theme and message and communicate it in a way that's going to attract the right readers. First off, you need to think about what subculture your reader is coming from. Often in marketing, people will use the term, what market are you aiming for, instead of subculture, but it's pretty much the same thing, because when you're talking about communicating to your reader through your story, you're going to want to think about who particularly are you hoping will come to the story. And if we go back to the idea of meaning, what kind of baggage are they bringing to it? What kind of life experience are they bringing to it? Where are you hoping to meet them on their journey, and what do they look like? I'm not saying you have to know eye color and hair color and all of those things, but it is a good idea to understand your takeaways and all of those things in terms of what your reader is going to want from the book. And that's where the idea of your ideal reader avatar comes from. So, aka the upper class white Christian woman looking for a quick read in between taking her kids to various activities. That's going to be a different kind of market, and you're going to weave your messaging it in there differently. You're going to speak about it differently to them. And that might be an individual who wants to hear more overt messaging, depending on how you're aiming it. Versus one of my ideal reader avatars, or one of the ideal traits, is my readers are often geeks. I write in science fiction and fantasy. And so since I'm aware that my readers are going to be geeks who probably are aware of different kinds of fandoms in some way or another, I liberally toss in Easter eggs all throughout my books that are just fun, teasing things, or during a pivotal moment in one of my urban fantasy books, I have a reference to Star Wars, and it's a pivotal moment in the character's arc and what she's dealing with. But I choose to reference Star Wars out of all things because I know my core readership is absolutely going to get it. And when I took that book through beta reading testing, they went, I got it. One of my beta readers literally highlighted that and went, LOL, I felt that. And so when you're aware of who you're communicating to, it can really help you to figure out how they're going to expect the message and theme to come across. Secondly, when you're talking about your theme and message, are you trying to affirm or challenge that ideal reader's perceptions? If you're on more of the cozy end of things, if you're trying to go for cozy, easy takeaways, then your book is going to try to affirm what people already know or believe to be true. Because at the end of a long day, when people reach for a cozy book, they're looking for a brain massage, and they're looking for something where they're not having to engage with something difficult or something that may require them to have to parse through it and go, oh, I don't agree with that, but that's interesting. They may not want that. And so if you're going for that kind of book, that kind of angle, that kind of readership, then you're going to communicate your message in a very easy way that is going to be very cozy. Conversely, if you're writing more of a hard edge, experimental kind of book, or if you're writing a book that is just meant to challenge more, and you know that your readers are looking for that, you label it as a dashing, fast-paced, intense book, a book with fresh ideas, a book with conflict or intrigue, then in that case, you may be using an ensemble cast and different characters who have different beliefs or different ideas to convey your message or discuss how it's going to be conveyed. Because readers are there for that. They want that engagement, they want that thoughtfulness, and they want that level of openness and sharpness. Now, generally, when people are trying to make easy sales of books, they will often tailor their message and their theme to what their reader wants. They're often going to try to affirm what the reader enjoys, what they believe to be true, and just take them on that journey that continues to affirm it, because that is one of the easiest ways to sell a book. People often read fiction for escapism in various ways. Books that challenge and provoke and things like that, you often find those more commonly in nonfiction. Now, truth be told, when we're talking about what kind of fiction books end up with awards, sometimes the super edgy, challenging books with all the experimental ideas get the awards because the judges are like, I'm so tired of all the same thing. I want something different. I will vote for this. Yay! But when we're talking about what people actually buy regularly, people often buy things that are either connected to their worldview or in some way tangentially part of their worldview. And if they want to be challenged, then they will mindfully go outside of that and choose a book from a very different worldview. So the idea of taking something familiar and then upending the messaging just for the fun of it, it's a little bit like saying, I'm going to take an ice cream sundae, except I'm going to put asparagus in it, and I'm going to sell it to people who think that I am selling them an ice cream sundae, and that will show them it's different. Shockingly, people may not actually go for this in the way you think they might. Bait and switches don't always go over that well on the receiving end, but ultimately, the choice is up to you. Another way to communicate the ideas of your theme and message in a way that readers are going to connect with and in their particular reader language is to see about what tropes are associated with that theme and message. Tropes can provide an easy common language, which is why you see them everywhere. And I know some of you out there are like, Janeen, I am so tired of tropes. What about when I have a book that doesn't look pretty on a trope graphic or doesn't work with that kind of marketing? I get you. And especially when we're talking books aimed at male audiences, your trope graphics aren't really the thing. You're going to convey a lot of your tropes and expectations in your description and in your book cover, maybe in some endorsements, things like that. Cutesy trope graphics are mostly something that come along when you're talking about female audiences of specific genres. But that being said, you can still use your information about tropes or about expected plot twists or about expected dynamics in your description and in your even the idea and the feel of your book cover and the way that you pose things on your book cover, which book covers their own kind of visual language, which we will talk about in a future episode. But when we're talking about these tropes, you can think about friendship or romantic pairings, choice of career of the protagonist, type of magic or superpower used, and emotional wounds. All of those things can lead into stuff that readers are going to be interested in. So the downtrodden misfit hero or heroine, which is one of the things I write a lot of, or the plucky young farm boy going off to seek his adventure, or the epic quest to stop evil and overcome it with good. Dark lords in the east or the west or wherever the dark lords are coming from these days. The uppity billionaire and the lowly coffee shop barista. And these are some pretty common tropes or pairings or concepts, but I bet in your book you can find some really interesting ways of conveying your message and theme through those tropes. It just takes a little bit of creativity and, yes, some help and sometimes some mindful tweaking of your book itself to better fit those tropes according to what you prefer. Always remember that you are the author of this story. So if you're at this place where you're like, well, Janeen, I really want to do more tropey things, or I want to make this a little bit more palatable to readers so they enjoy my message, but I just can't because the story doesn't want that. Authors, you are the author of your book. And with understanding of the fact that, you're accountable to your values and your convictions, and if you're a Christian or some other religious group, you're accountable to that deity. I'm as a Christian, I'm accountable to God. But with all that being understood, as much as it depends on you, you can change your book and tweak it to what you want it to be. So if you choose to not do that, that is also a choice that you can make. You need to own that, or own the idea of changing it, or do whatever makes sense for you. I never want to see people feel helpless in this whole concept of using marketing and messaging as tropes as communication. There are solutions. There are ways forward. Sometimes it takes a lot of effort. Sometimes it is hard. Sometimes it leads you on paths that you maybe don't want to go down. I have video about what to do when writing gets hard, and I'm sure I'll have more there because I'm in the trenches with you. But understand that this is communication, and you do have control over how you're talking and how you're talking on paper and all of those things. So, what is the theme or message of your current book? Please do share in a comment below on the YouTube video. I would love to read and reply. And if you have any other questions about theme or messaging, please also leave those in a comment because they could inspire a future video. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. This is Janeen Ippolito of Author Culture. Go forth and be awesome.